Well, it's close to 7 months of war in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to finally end Hamas's power in Gaza once and for all. As IDF troops are preparing for their ground incursion into Rafah, a new long-term ceasefire and hostage release deal is now on the table. But will Hamas finally budge and accept the terms? And what does this do for Israel? For much more, I'm joined by Tal Heinrich. She is a spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal, there's plenty of moving pieces happening right now. How is Prime Minister Netanyahu feeling about this proposed deal? And is he weighing any of this with these? We know there's some preparations here to go into Rafah. How does that work into all of this?
Thank you for having me on this morning, John. You see, more than 6 months ago, after the October 7th massacre, we took a decision as a nation when we defined the war objectives. We said that we want to bring every hostage back home. There's not going to be leaving of anyone behind. We're a nation that's committed to this principle. We said that we will dismantle Hamas and that we will make sure that Gaza will never pose a terror threat to us again. Now, each one of these war objectives, they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they go hand in hand. We can't discuss on air the terms and the nature of negotiations that are taking place in order to try to yield another framework which will see the release of the remaining hostages, 133 of them, for very obvious reasons. It's very sensitive and human lives hang in the balance. But I can tell you that there's not going to be any kind of ceasefire that would leave Hamas in power, the hostages in Gaza, and there's not going to be any kind of humanitarian pause in the fighting without the release of hostages. We know that the only thing that works against Hamas is pressure. It's military pressure and diplomatic pressure. This is how we got the deal that we had back in November, which saw the release of more than 100 hostages. But the truth of the matter is that Hamas rejected so far every kind of compromise. You heard it from the White House, you heard it from us. Mm-hmm. And when you approach negotiations and you're serious about negotiations, you have to show two things. You have to show determination, but also to show flexibility, right? Yeah. And every time Israel has shown more flexibility, Hamas has hardened its position so far. They want to remain in power without having to release all the hostages. They want to see a full IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. And in other words, they simply want to be in power, live another day, and carry out another October 7th massacre. We will continue to do whatever it takes in order to try to bring each and every one of our stolen people home. They've been going through a living hell, a torture of mind and soul for their families, for our entire nation, and they must come back home.
Can you give us an update here on this incursion into Rafah? How soon could we see this happen, and how does this hostage deal maybe play into it?
So Rafah is, let's just explain to the viewers, it's the southern city in Gaza Strip, the one that borders Egypt. It's a very strategic location for a few reasons. First, we know that there are 4 remaining Hamas battalions there that are operational. We're not going to leave them untouched. This is why we must go into Rafah. The border with Egypt is also a very strategic corridor from which much of the infrastructure and ammunition has funneled into Gaza over the years. This is why it's also something that must be secured. We will no longer continue to live next to this terror enclave, and we cannot allow any such ammunition to enter from there in the future after we eliminate Hamas. And as NewsMax also reported just a bit more than a month ago, a few weeks ago, we went into Rafah in a very surgical, precise operation, and we rescued 2 of our hostages there. So for all of these reasons and others, we must go into Rafah and operate there. There are plans being made. Of course, any kind of operation there will be carried out with full consideration of civilian care.
The U.S. says it's begun this construction of a temporary pier on Gaza's coastline to speed up the humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. Still unclear how that aid is going to be distributed once it's on the ground. But do you have any new information on that? Is there anything that's been coordinated here with the U.S.?
So it is in the works. You see, both Jerusalem and Washington, all of us want to see more humanitarian aid entering Gaza. I can tell you that, in fact, more food is entering Gaza today already than even before the war, more water. So we want to see more. We're trying to find, we have been trying to find more and more creative ways of getting the aid inside Gaza, even though the challenge is to, distribute the aid and not so much to get it inside, because we have a couple of hundreds of trucks. I think the average is more than 358 trucks entering already every day. Pallets are being airdropped in the north. We have the Jordanian route, we have the Egyptian route, we have the maritime route now. And with the pier, we will be able to see more humanitarian aid worthy of, I think, a couple dozens, if not hundred of trucks entering Gaza in the coming weeks. And we hope to see the work completed. The IDF is securing the works there. And we hope we'll be able to share more about it down the road.
So we're also here at home. We're witnessing these displays of anti-Semitism at colleges across the country. But when the president Biden he gave some thoughts on this, and I want to play this for you. And he appears to have some difficulty here, saying who specifically is at fault. Let me watch.
You condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses.
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians.
So we saw the images there, and now how the president's responded. Tal, your thoughts on this and just the president's comments there?
So first, it's important that we call these protests out for what they are. These are anti-Semitic protests. You know, some people, some media outlets I saw are trying to label them as pro-Palestinian. No, they're not pro-Palestinian. They're anti-Israel, anti-Western, anti-America. What they're reflective of is a woke jihadi alliance. Because listen to what these people there chant. You know, in Michigan, they chanted "Death to America." At Princeton, I saw some flags of Hezbollah, being held by students. Do these people even know how many American soldiers were killed by Hezbollah? Not to mention the threat to Israel in our war with them. At Columbia University, you see flags of Palestinian terrorists. And whenever these students are being confronted with questions by reporters, but by people who actually know a thing or two about the conflict, they don't even know what the signs that they're holding, what the pictures that they're holding say, what they mean. Their full ignorance, pure ignorance is being revealed, their moral hollowness. And, these students, they never fought a war. They never lived through a war. They don't know what it means to face an existential genocidal threat as Israelis are facing, the threat called Hamas. Their loved ones are not being held in Gaza for more than 200 days. Their communities weren't raped and butchered and burned and tortured. We have to, and by the way, I think the most telling thing about these protests is the thing that the Ayatollah of Iran and Hamas and other terror groups are praising them. These are useful idiots, John, because the terrorists are watching them and they say, they're doing the work for us.
Yeah.
We can sit back and let the international pressure that these students are trying to apply play so we could live another day to carry out another October 7th massacre. That's what they're hoping for, that there are enough stupid people out there.
Tal, you're very correct. And I mean, we've talked to some of these protesters. They clearly, some of them don't know why they're even out there. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, John.